Hi, and welcome to a presentation from the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. Happy to be here with you on this day because I have a fabulous guest. His name is Leblanc, and he's coming to us just north of the Toronto area. And I want to welcome you, Robert. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me in. It's very much a pleasure to be with you today.
It truly is. And to learn more about him, please do go to his website. It's at catholicmoment.ca. And actually, his website is right on our own website through the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation at nonnatus.org under our helpful resources. So please do check it out because he's got some wonderful resources to grow in your faith. He is a Catholic Christian husband, father, educator. He's been married for 24 years to his wife, Aaliyah. He is the father of a 16-year-old son and an educator for over 26 years. So again, welcome. And our topic today is prayer and the modern family. I know we have a lot to discuss and we'll be enriched by your talk.
Thank you. And again, thank you for having me. So prayer in the modern family. And one of your guests on your podcast, on the Sowing Hope podcast, Patrick Sullivan, who's also a friend of mine, once said, as he was talking to a group of parents who were preparing for their children for First Communion, and he said, children will love what their parents love. Right? And one of the best examples I have of this is within my own family. So I'm of a French-Canadian background, but growing up in Toronto, it's an English-speaking area. But because of the French-Canadian background, my father being French-Canadian, when it comes to hockey teams, there's always been a divide between the French-Canadians and kind of parts east of Canada are Montreal Canadiens fans, and then Toronto and parts west, Toronto Maple Leafs fans. So because my father was a Montreal Canadiens fan, I'm a Montreal Canadiens fan, and then now my son and my nephews, even though most of them only have a small like of hockey, if you were to ask them, who do you cheer for? They'll tell you Montreal Canadiens, even though they couldn't tell you who the players are or where they are in the standings. But that's just because of children will grow to love what their parents love. And it goes beyond sports as well, whether it's food or music or television shows or movies. Parents will love what their children love. And this is important to understand when it comes to developing the faith in our families, because if we as parents don't have that relationship with God, how are our children going to have that relationship with God? And so when I speak to families about this, one of the things that I do, it's a little exercise that I do with them, is how to find out what it is, what are the loves of your life. And so, well, how do you spend your life? And we'll just take a look at a typical day, and how many hours do you spend sleeping, and how many hours do you spend at work, how many hours do you spend in front of the television, how many hours do you spend eating meals or commuting, and then also how much time do you spend in prayer every day, how much time do you spend with the Lord? And when I did this exercise myself, and it's kind of like an examination of conscience, it's an examination of our spiritual conscience, and I realized that I spent more time in the car commuting to school than I did in prayer. And I have in many ways, a very short commute. It's less than half an hour one way. And I was spending more time in the car listening to the radio than I was in spiritual endeavors. And then I like to take it one step further. Who do you spend time speaking with over the course of a day? And many of us will be surprised that a lot of times we spend more time speaking with coworkers than we even do with our families. Right?
Good point.
Right? And you look at, okay, but who's more important to you? Well, my family's more important. Well, okay, but why are you spending so much time speaking with your coworkers and not so much time in conversation with your families? And so as I did this examination and I went through, how much time do I spend with speaking with different people in my life? And I was floored, shocked, and devastated to realize I spent more time speaking with the dog than I do speaking with God.
I remember
Right?
you said this before. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And
You're probably not the only one.
No, it's when the dog starts talking back that I get a little bit worried. And so if we don't have that relationship with God, how are we going to pass that on to our children? How can we cultivate that within our families? And building a relationship with God, we need to spend that time with Him. I just recently, last week, did a video. So again, if you go through catholicmoment.ca and find the video about Lectio Divina and about spending time with our Lord to grow in relationship, because we do that with the people in our life. If we want to grow in relationship with someone, we spend time with them. And in the video, I talk about doing that through Lectio Divina, but I also refer that we do that in our prayer life. And it's in spending time with God in prayer that we develop that relationship with Him. And that's one of our jobs as parents, is to teach that to our children. Now, when it comes to building that prayer life within the family, we have to realize that it's not done overnight either, right?
I would agree too.
I always say you don't start, you're running, you don't, okay, I'm going to start running. You don't start with a marathon. You'll start with maybe going around the block, and then twice around the block, and you build that up. So like our fitness life, when it comes to our prayer life, we also have to set goals, but we need to set attainable goals. And parents have to look at their family and look at their children and set goals that are attainable for their family. So again, okay, we want to start, we're going to turn over a new leaf. We're going to start having a prayerful family life. And we're going to start having a prayerful family life by praying all 20 mysteries of the Rosary every day. Yeah, that's, you'll get 1 or 2 days, and then that's just going to, and depending on the kids and the age of the kids too, you might get 1 or 2 decades, and it's,
that's a good example.
Right? And so we need to kind of have a goal in mind, but an attainable goal in mind. And a lot of people, and when I speak to families, whether it's in catechesis in preparation for the sacraments, or with parents of my students at school, a lot of times the comments, well, we just don't have the time to have a family prayer life. If only there was more time, if there was only 8 days in a week or 25 hours in a day, then we'd fit it in. And that comes back to the priority setting that I kind of mentioned before, as far as what's important in your life, where you're going to spend that time. And people always say, I need to make time for my prayer life. And the thing is as humans, we can't make time. The creation of time is God's and God's alone.
Yes.
But we can take time. And I always say it's not about making time, it's about taking time. And the best example, again, I can give is when I met Ellie, that I knew I wanted to spend time with this woman so I could grow in relationship with her. Well, to do that, I had to take time away from hanging out with my buddies, right? So you take time from one activity for the other. And it's the same with our prayer life. So again, at one point I decided I want to do the readings of the day. But in my morning routine, there just wasn't enough time. And I couldn't make time within my morning routine, so I had to take time. I had to set the alarm half an hour earlier, right? So I had to take time from my sleep to do the readings of the day. And again, when it came, I wanted to start praying the Rosary every day. I ended up taking time from when I would walk the dog, I would just let my mind ramble and daydream. And I have to take time from those daydreams to focus on praying the Rosary.
That's such a good point, because you're right. There's only so much allotted time, and it takes a prayer to discern where that time is going. So I appreciate that, especially those people who are watching who are parents and they're concerned about their kids' faith. You know, it starts within ourselves too, is what I'm hearing from you.
Yes, yeah, well, exactly, because you know, as parents, we're the first educators of our children, and we're the ones that they look up to, and we're the ones that they're going to learn from. And so if they see us exempling these prayerful activities, they will want to follow suit as well. And a little bit later, I'll talk a little bit about, you know, as the kids get older and they want to develop their own identity, they'll start to veer away. And in some ways, sometimes in creating their own identity, it's like, well, I'm not like my parents. I know I went through a period in my life, in my late teens and early 20s, is I am not like my father. When I started teaching, and the first time I had to discipline a student, I looked over my shoulders, like, is my dad here? Because all I could hear was his voice, right? So if we as parents begin building that relationship and setting the example for our kids, and setting the examples for others around us, because that does have a ripple effect within our real life. And when it comes to then setting these goals and taking this time, one thing too with kids, and I've learned this as a teacher and as a father, is, you know, kids love routine. Actually, we as adults love routine. I mean, I think even when you see a room full of adults, and I can say this as a teacher, like, you want to see a bunch of teachers get upset, tell them the school day's been rearranged, because that routine and being tied to the bell is so key. And students, the kids love routine. They love to know what is going to happen, when it's going to happen, and kind of the order that things are going to happen in. And so it's very important when you're starting to build your prayer life at home, is that you have a routine. That you have the routine that you don't start eating before you say grace before meals. And
That's a good one.
It'll take reminders at the beginning, but the kids will eventually realize, no, we need to sit and wait until everybody's at the table and we've said our prayer, and we can move on. The other one too is we have the routine as a family of saying a morning benediction, a morning prayer before we start our days. And so we know that we don't take off out of the house until everyone is together and we've said our prayer, and we move on. And again, coming back to doing the parallel of our spiritual life being much like our physical fitness life, it's the same. People who have physical fitness goals will go for a run at the same time every day. We'll go to the gym at the same time every day. That routine is key to keeping up and building that part of your life. And it's no different for our prayer life, because our prayer life in many ways is a lot like a muscle. The more often we use it, the stronger it becomes.
That's right. These are all wonderful points. And especially as we're kind of coming out of, hopefully, this pandemic, some people's schedules have kind of been mixed up. So it's good to hear that this whole idea of routine does help to give that balance to people's lives, especially when it comes to spirituality and prayer.
Yeah. And if people keep hearkening back to the website and the videos, if people are looking for maybe a more concise 5 to 7 minute version of that, on the website there is a talk about keeping spiritually active in a time of quarantine. But it doesn't have to be in the time of quarantine. It doesn't have to be in the time of pandemic. It's, how do we remain spiritually active? And I talk about having the goal setting and the routines and all of that in there. And it's, like I said, let's say 10 minutes or less. And I know it's definitely less than 10 minutes, usually in the 5 to 7 minute range. And so just to kind of give a few examples of things that can be done to help build up that routine and help build up that prayer repertoire within the family. And we spoke about grace before meals. And again, we always need to keep in mind the ages of our kids and what they're able to do. And so when it comes to grace before meals, when the kids are younger, you might want to have a children's grace with them, and then move into the formal standard rote grace that we usually say before meals. The bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts. And then from there, as they grow in prayer ability, and as we as parents grow in prayer ability, we can start having that a little bit more fluid and not necessarily follow the script, so to speak. So and have the kids then be the ones that are leading the prayer as well. You model it as parents, but eventually you want the kids to take over. And modeling a more fluid grace before meals, where we'll pray, Lord, bless the food that's on our table, bless all of the hands that have worked to bring it from field to table. Thank you for bringing us together as a family. Thank you for the love that we share as a family. And we also thank you for our furry family member.
Yeah. My daughters always remember that.
Yeah. Okay. So there's that growth as well. Once the realistic goals have been set and the routines have been found, and you start working through the prayer repertoire, you can grow in that. Another example that I bring forward, and it's one that we developed as a family ourselves, is to do a morning benediction before we go out to face the world. My wife and I to our separate schools, and my son off to his school. And so we always have some holy water in the house, and we will bless each other. So we'll take the holy water and trace the sign of the cross over each other's forehead. God bless Mike, and God bless Mom. And we'll have our son give us a benediction. And again, we'll pray for the dog at that time too, because she is part of the family and part of God's creation. And at one point we kind of wonder, are we allowed to be giving this blessing to our child? And Father Mitch Pacwa, I heard one time on the EWTN radio, he said, you are as a parent called to bless your child. And he said, you do that at baptism. You trace the cross, the sign of the cross on your child's forehead at baptism. And so that is part of our role as parents, to give that blessing. So we'll say that benediction. We'll then do some family intercessions. So people that we need to be praying for at that time, whether it's friends that are in need of healing. Again, we'll pray for each other. May Mike have calmness of mind and heart as he writes his test later today. May Mommy have the strength and courage that she needs to make her way through her day in kindergarten. And if you need strength and courage in one place, it's definitely in teaching kindergarten. That's just why I teach high school. I could not do kindergarten. It's just two completely different worlds. And then we'll finish off with an Our Father, Hail Mary, a Glory Be, and the prayer to Saint Michael. Because if we need to be defended in battle, in these days we need that angelic help to go out into the world. And that's part of our prayer too, that we have the humility and the wisdom to know God's will, and that we have the strength and the courage to be a light of Christ to the world, to bring them closer to God. And so this is our morning routine. And so it's kind of, we're at the end of summer holidays, so it really hasn't been part of our routine in the summer, so it's kind of coming back in bits and pieces right now. And so that's part of our prayer routine. We'll have family rosary times. And again, when our son was younger, it was just a decade, because that's all we could do at that time. And it's, again, just knowing your family and your kids and having those realistic expectations. Some spiritual reading on Sunday evening is another one. And there's some great resources out there, family prayer books or family readings, that will take you through the calendar of the church and the liturgical seasons of the church, and help open up the readings that we heard at Mass on Sunday. And it's part of almost like a lectio for the family, and part of understanding God's will for us. And another one that is developed in our home, and I heard other families talk a little bit about this, is having a family patron saint.
That's excellent.
Who is the patron saint of your family? And I've had people come up and say, well, how can we find, or how can we choose a patron saint for our family? And I'll say, you won't choose the patron saint for your family. The saint will choose your family. right? And the example I can give for that is for us is Saint Anne, Santa Anna, the mother of Our Lady, is the patron saint of our family. And along with Saint Michael the Archangel, and I'll explain both of those. Saint Anne, when I was little, like from the time of my earliest memories, we would go visit my dad's family in Ottawa, our capital city, and my grandmother would give us her bedroom in the apartment to sleep in. So my parents got the bed, and my sister and I, we got the floor. Right? But at the foot of her bed, there was always a statue of Saint Anne. And I always just kind of wondered, who is this lady, and ask about her. When my grandmother passed away, somehow Saint Anne came into my own mother's possession, and she is now in our home with very much a prominent place in our dining room. That's my side of the story of how Saint Anne came to be patron saint of our family, but there's also a side from my part of the story that comes from my wife's side of the family. And 5 years ago now, we went with my wife's parents back to their home in the Azores. They immigrated from the Azores 55 years ago or so. And we went to her dad's home island in his hometown. We were there for the end of July. And the parish church of his hometown is Saint Anne. Right? And we were there for the feast of Santa Anna, or the feast of Saint Anne and Joachim. And with this beautiful procession and the flower carpets through the streets. And to kind of give you an idea of this, so the island of Saint George, where my father-in-law is from, is 50 kilometers long by 8 kilometers wide. So to put that in miles, 35 miles long by about 5 miles wide, and a year-round population of about 3,000 people. But this feast day, flower carpets, procession through the streets. When they were saying the Mass for Saint Anne, they're letting off fireworks during the consecration. Right? It was a huge, huge deal. And so we came to realize that Saint Anne, from both sides of our family, is one of our patron saints, and the other is Saint Michael. And again, when we look at our families, our son is Michael. My great-grandfather was Michael. My sister is Michel. On my wife's side, her mom comes from the island of Saint Michael. Her brother is a Michael. And so it's just that Saint Michael just incorporated himself into our family. And families need to just kind of be cognizant of what saint is trying to speak to them, what saint is trying to weave their way into their family. And if they come to know that saint, they'll start to realize why that saint is weaving themselves into their family.
That's so beautiful.
So,
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. And again, I get goosebumps when I talk about these things, because you just become more cognizant of how the Lord is working in your family life. And again, so just to kind of come back to, why is all of this important? Because I've been rambling on here. Why is this all important, to build this prayer life and to build this faith life in our families? Again, like I said at the beginning, children will love what we love as
That's
parents.
true.
And when you think about it, what's our number one job as parents? Our number one job as parents is to get our kids to heaven. Right?
Absolutely.
And so we need to be doing these things to build the faith life in our children, so that they do get to heaven. And, if it pleases God, hopefully one day we'll be together as a family in God's presence in heaven.
That's a beautiful thought.
That's just always my prayer. But like I said before, I referred to a little bit before, as our kids get older, they'll start to want to develop their own identity. And sometimes part of that building of their identity is pushing away from their parents' identity. And part of that can be, well, my parents are so faith-filled and prayerful, I'm going to be the exact opposite of that. And when I've had parents kind of ask about this, I've always said, I talk about faith being like garlic. Or if you want to be maybe a little bit more flowery, faith being like tulips. you plant the bulbs. So you plant the garlic in the late fall, early winter. And the same with tulip bulbs. And then it lies dormant throughout the winter. And then it will eventually begin to sprout and grow. And then eventually will flower, or you'll eventually have the fruit of the garlic. And so when our children are young, that's that time of planting. But there will come a time, and it happened in my own life, that there was a time from my mid-teens until my early 20s where the faith lay dormant. I wasn't practicing my faith. I wasn't going to Mass. I had zero prayer life. But that faith lies dormant, to be watered, though, by the Holy Spirit, and to be watered by our prayers as parents. So if your child's faith is lying dormant right now, don't think it's dead. It's just asleep, and water that with your prayers, because it will eventually flower, and it might not happen for you to see. And that's again, speaking with a colleague about our students that come through our classrooms, and we talk about that. We're planting all of these seeds, but when the kid comes in and out of our classroom, and after 5 months, we never see them again. Will it ever germinate and grow? Well, that's not always for us to see. And I give an example. I taught confirmation classes for a few years, and part of that was speaking with parents. And I had, after the initial orientation meeting for the parents, I had a dad come up to me, and he said, we haven't been going to church. He says, I haven't been going to church for us. I grew up in the faith. The faith was very strong with my mom. She always prayed for us. She always asked why we weren't going to church. He said, I never did. He said, about 6 months ago, my mom passed away. And he said, we got word through the school that confirmation classes were coming. And so my son's coming to the confirmation class. He's going to be confirmed. And he says, I see this as an invitation back. I want to grow my faith life, and I want to be that example for my kids. And so where his mother never saw the fruition of his faith life, her watering of it, her planting the seeds and watering of it as he was growing into manhood, finally came to fruition. And in some ways, when we look at our teenage children and our young adult children, that's our role, is to water the faith. And you look at Saint Monica and Saint Augustine, right, as the prime example of this.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Hey, we'll have to do a part 2 because there's so much to discuss, and you are so knowledgeable. I want to mention to those who are with us here on this video on YouTube or wherever you're watching it, to please get in touch with Robert at his website and just learn more about the wonderful work that he is doing at catholicmoment.ca. So please check it out. As I said, he is a Catholic catechist teacher with so much experience and just a wealth of knowledge and really wisdom. You have so much wisdom to share. Thank you so much. I'm sorry that we have to end this half-hour program here for this day. Did you have any final words before we end?
I would just ask that your viewers, if they could pray for me as a Catholic Christian, pray for myself as a father and husband, and I will pray for them as well. So again, thank you so much for having me.
And such beautiful takeaways, especially the idea, of course, scheduling out that prayer time and being regular, but also the patron saint for the family. May I suggest for all of you that if you don't know about Saint Raymond Nonnatus, he is the patron saint of family life, expectant mothers, and also those who are falsely accused. So if you know someone in that category too, please do pray to our own saint here with the St. Raymond Nonnatus Foundation. So again, Robert, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see all of you next time. Have a great day.